Hello, hello, hello. This is the Haves and the Have-Nots review. I'm your host. Oh no, I'm just kidding. I'm not gonna do that. But it was a good episode last night. Seriously, we found out some things about some characters that help us, understand why those characters are the way they are, why some of the relationships are the way they are. So we start off at the Crier Mansion, picks up right where it left off last week with Wyatt being confronted by Jim about him saying that he didn't blame Amanda for checking out and that he was going to go to the DA and spill everything about the hit and run. Jim is like, take it back, you're ungrateful, and all that stuff. And Wyatt doesn't really care. He's trying to drink, and Jim doesn't want him drinking. So Jim goes over and just pours all this liquor all over Wyatt. And Wyatt is grown, but that was abusive for a parent to do to their child of any age. I don't care. That's just. And Wyatt punched him out for it, and I was on Wyatt's side there. And then Wyatt spilled all the tea about Jim sleeping with all these women. Wyatt's babysitters, his English teacher, everything just comes out. And the other thing that comes out is that while Wyatt was away at camp being violated by a priest, Jim was off with Celine. Now, Catherine was under the impression that Jim was somewhere else when this happened. But no, he was off carrying on with Celine. So now we know why Wyatt has the animosity towards Jim that he does. We know now why he reacted to um, those texts the way he did, because apparently Jim had sent himself emails patting himself on the back for his conquest. Jim's a pretty messed up guy, it turns out. And so, of course, the Harringtons are there, and once everything has settled down, Wyatt has gone upstairs, and Jeffrey wants to go up and comfort him, and David's saying, go to Wyatt. Because really, above all else, Wyatt and Jeffrey are friends, and at a trying time, you want your friends around. But of course, Veronica only sees everything through a very narrow, myopic point of view, which all has to do with Jeffrey being gay. So she tells him to go home, and Jeffrey he contemplates for a second, and then Veronica gives him a death glare, and that's his cue to go home because he leaves. And she tells him, use the back door. And Jeffrey, like the trained puppet she has him trained to be, goes out the back door as if he's the help. Don't use the back. Don't use the front door. Use the back. So from there, we Candace gets a hold of Jeffrey. Jeffrey's in his car headed home, and she's saying that she never expected Amanda to do anything like that. And Jeffrey said, well, "I told you she was unstable." And Candace says she liked Amanda, which I do think that Candace did like Amanda, but I think that she allowed her need to her own personal agenda for money and all that to get in the way of actually having a decent friendship with Amanda. Because I think they could have been really good friends, and I think she did care about Amanda, but Amanda got caught up in the middle of her manipulation. And so Candace asked Jeffrey something about Jim, and Jeffrey's like, no, no, I'm not telling you anything about Jim. Because at this point, everybody knows about Jim and Candace. So, that was that scene. And so back at the Crier Mansion, we get Veronica, and she's making a call to the doctor to bring over some drugs for the Criers because they're so distraught. And everybody turns to drugs, prescription drugs, when something goes wrong. It's kind of sad that people do that, but it is what it is. Okay, and so David comes out, and he's trying to talk some sense to Veronica about doing Jeffrey the way she does him. And he says, "Do you want Jeffrey to do what Amanda did?" Veronica's like, "Jeffrey's not mentally ill." And I love this line from David. I said yes when he said it, and he said, "But apparently his mother is." And I said yes. Finally, somebody's telling Veronica like it is. And I gotta say, in this episode, Veronica did look really crazy. It seemed like they were doing something with the lighting to kind of give her a more crazy, delusional look, and the actress really seemed to be stepping up her game playing this role. Because Veronica was, her persona was darker than it's ever been. It's like she just doesn't care anymore. So she goes into her delusional rant, and she's saying, talking about Melissa, and she's saying he likes her, and David keeps saying Jeffrey is gay, and she seems to think, well, they're having sex, so that makes some difference, and David's, he can't talk any sense to her, and Veronica comes off with some weird sick, "Oh, you're jealous that he's telling me about his sexual escapades because that's what fathers and sons usually do." And I said, "Veronica, you're going off the rails. Maybe you should have been calling that doctor for a prescription because you need something, because your mind is shot." So when we get back to when it gets to they keep on arguing about this, and finally David says, "I'll call Melissa and tell her that Jeffrey is gay." And so Veronica says, "Give me your phone, I'll call her, and you can tell her that." So she banters with Melissa just a little bit, and then David takes the phone, and David is right out with it. I thought David was going to chicken out on this at first, but he says Jeffrey is gay. And Melissa, she's kind of like, I know, but I like him. And you can tell that this is not something that she wants to do. You can tell that she is under some sort of duress. It's not something she wants to do. And we find out that it's not of her, not really something she wants to do, because when she gets off the phone with David, we pan over and we see that in the bed, she's in Melissa's in a hospital, and I'm guessing it's her father, and he's in the bed, and he looks very ill, hooked up to machines. So I'm guessing that Veronica is paying for Melissa's father's health care in exchange for Melissa playing this stupid game. So that was that with that scene. And so Hannah comes over to see Candace. Benny brings her over, and this was such a great scene. Crystal Fox and Tika Sumter delivered. So Hannah says for years she's tried to forgive Candace for the way that she's treated her, because Candace, even when she was little, she was embarrassed of her mother. She, at school, when Hannah would bring Candace to school, she would run ahead of her so the other children wouldn't see Hannah bringing her to school in her maid's uniform. But that's really that really was just part of the powerful part of the scene, because we find out just why Candace is as messed up as she is. Okay, so when Hannah was young, she had a boyfriend, Marvin, and it turns out that Marvin was a child molester and had been abusing Candace. And Candace was under the impression that Hannah didn't do anything about this. But Hannah did do something about it. She said, "I called the police on him." And she said, "No, you didn't. He left you." And she said, "No, he left because he was afraid of what was going to happen." And she says, "But the police found him and they arrested him." And She says, don't you remember the police coming to your school and asking you all these questions? And Candace says, you weren't there for me. And she says, they wouldn't let me be in there with you. And Hannah's still not believing that Candace has gone legit. And she's right, because Candace did not get this money legit. Hannah said, nobody is going to hire you fresh out of law school and put you up in a room like this. And Benny wants to believe Candace, but Benny, he loves Candace so much that he is willing to just, I think he's willing to be a little bit naive about the whole reality of the situation. Candace has not gone straight. She's still being Candace. So, Hannah and Candace share a hug, and Candace tells her to leave because Candace doesn't want to break and actually admit that she cares about Hannah, that she loves her mother. She's got to keep that tough exterior up. So Hannah goes on. She says, all right. And she says she really wants Candace to get on a straight track, because if she doesn't stop, she's going to end up dead. And that was a powerful, powerful scene. The next powerful scene was with Catherine and Veronica. Now, Catherine is, of course, is distraught. She's saying, I've got to call a funeral home. I've never called a funeral home before. It's killing her that her daughter is gone. And I fully understood why Catherine chose to start talking to Veronica about Jeffrey. She just says, Veronica, you need to accept who Jeffrey is. You cannot change him. She tells this story about how when Amanda was young and in gymnastics, she broke her arm. So Catherine was in such a panic that she flew on a specialist from New York because she wanted her arm to heal properly. She wanted Amanda to be perfect. But people aren't perfect. They have their own minds, and you can't raise your children to be anything other than who they are. The more you try to make them be what you want them to be, the more they are going to be their own self. And Veronica, she decides to throw some shade at Catherine. She says, we raised our children very differently. Catherine says, say what you have to say. But Veronica, she doesn't say what she has to say. She just says good night, goes on. Veronica, she just was so, like I said, she just came off really dark in this episode. Persona, very dark, menacing, just, I don't give a darn. So we end up over at the Sarandon Hotel. Maggie meets up with Landon. Landon's drunk. He is saying, well, I was fired. I don't want to have anything to do with the Harringtons. I don't want to hear about these numbers of how Jim is going to be guaranteed the governor's mansion because his daughter is dead. Maggie was cold here. She said, well, this tragedy has practically guaranteed him the governor's mansion. And that's kind of a reality of how these political operatives are. If a tragedy benefits a candidate's chances, the manager will be like, well, it's a tragedy, but it's a positive that's going to uplift our campaign. Sad state of politics. But that's how it is. Don't want to get into that, but I'm going to keep talking about the show. So, okay, so Candace comes back down, and she's like, tells Maggie, get out my chair. And Maggie says, I don't see your name on it. And Candace says, yeah, it's on there. I'm a bad bee, or something like that. Candace is so funny. So she sits down at the table, and she spills Maggie's tea. She lets it out that Maggie was, hugged up with David at the bar. I don't think Candace knows that well, I think she does know because a few episodes ago she said that David was coming out of a room with Maggie. Um, she spills that tea, and then Maggie's ready to get up and leave. Because Landon, he kind of like, he's like, has that drunk posture, and then when he hears about Maggie and David, he kind of like, say what? And so she goes on, and Candace is like, I knew I'd make a leave. And so Candace had pulled up another chair, and so once she gets up out that chair and goes and sits in the chair where Maggie was at. And this guy that had been looking at her from the last episode, he comes up to get the chair, and before he could say anything, Candace is like, I don't think so. And the guy's like, well, I'm expecting a beautiful woman, and I just want this chair. And so the guy takes the chair, and Candace is like, don't get no better than me, baby. So Candace kind of, you know, she got her ego bruised there a little bit because she was just so sure that the guy was coming over to hit on her. She got her ego bruised there a bit, and then she snapped back with, don't get no better than me, baby. So we go to David and Veronica, and David is just, he's had it up to here with her stuff, and Maggie calls him on the phone, and Veronica says, oh, she still doesn't know when to call a married man, the proper time to call a married man. And David's not having it, and he tells her, go home. And he's not even trying to have this conversation with her again. And so we get to the end. Jeffrey comes home, and it's dark. So he sees somebody laying in his bed, and he assumes that Candace sent a man over for him. And he gets on the phone and he leaves her a message. He says, you know what, Candace, this is the wrong time for you to pull this. Just stop. So he turns on the light, and the person gets up, and it's Crazy Quincy. And Jeffrey's like, Quincy? And Quincy wants to know where Candace is. Jeffrey says, I don't know. And truthfully, I don't think Jeffrey does know where Candace is. He knows that she had to leave and went to a hotel, but I don't think he knows her exact whereabouts, and he's not going to tell anyway because he knows that Quincy's a dangerous guy. It's clear he's a dangerous guy. And so, I believe, okay, so Jeffrey doesn't want to believe that his mother would be hooked up with Quincy. And Quincy says, your mama's a gangster. She got me out of the pen early. And she sent me after Candy. And Jeffrey doesn't want to believe this. And he calls his mother up. Okay, no, but first Quincy wants to bully Jeffrey into putting his password in so he can call Candace. Because Jeffrey tries to pretend he doesn't have Candace's number, but Quincy heard him leaving Candace a message. And so he tries to bully him to putting in the number. And so when after Quincy says all that about Veronica, Jeffrey dials Veronica's number, and Quincy's like, well, I didn't mean for you to call her. And Veronica's in the car looking hateful as ever, it's just like very vicious. You can see that, you know, she's so far gone now. She just don't care anymore. And so she says Jeffrey puts Veronica on the phone to Quincy, and Quincy says, they banter back and forth, and she's trying to figure out, why did you tell him that I sent you? And Quincy, he doesn't care about anything. He just wants to come after Candace. And so basically Veronica tells him, you either give up that girl or he's gonna hurt you. Quincy's gonna hurt you. And Jeffrey, he looks like he's about to cry. He's like, Mom, you wouldn't do that to me. And she just cut off the phone. Quincy puts on these brass knuckles, and you know when somebody puts on the brass knuckles, that's a real scary beatdown. Um, he Jeffrey won't give up Candace. He doesn't really know where she is anyway. So Quincy starts to fight him. Jeffrey does his best to fight back, but Quincy's a big dude, and he just knocks Jeffrey and down, and it ends with him just beating the crap out of Jeffrey. And so next week, we don't know how badly Jeffrey's gonna be hurt, but we see that Quincy is still, fighting him next week. So that was the episode. I hope I didn't miss anything, but I think I got this because I did my little checklist here on Open Office Writer to make sure that I covered everything. So thank you very much for watching my review. Join me next week for another review of the haves and the have-nots. Deuces.